So for us to not award to the low bidder, you know, then we open ourselves up.
Now, of course, one of the things that I had been alerted to prior to the meeting is that I had a citizen call me up because they were concerned about how bids were being awarded at the city of Maplewood, and that they had been looking at the various different companies that had put in a bid, and that they were wondering, when they were looking at it, they saw quite a difference in price between the lowest bidder and all the other companies that had bid. So they wanted to try to understand exactly why it was that maybe there was this very low bid. And so they did a little searching themselves, and I was very thankful that actually they had called me, and I think that they had also alerted some other people up at City Hall. And with regard to looking at Secretary of State and where companies have to be registered in order to do business in the state of Minnesota, this particular company, as a limited liability company, actually had only just been registered, I believe, of March of this year in 2009. And so when Mr. All is saying that this company has been doing business for a great number, well, for many number of years, what he's referring to, I think, is the fact that the people who are doing the work themselves, the individuals, perhaps in their experience, that they have been doing this type of work for a number of years. But this particular company itself, as a limited liability company, has not been doing this kind of work for a number of years. And actually, they've only been incorporated with the Secretary of State since March of 2009. It does appear from looking at the records of the Secretary of State that there was a company that is an assumed name, Urban Companies, that has been registered as an assumed name in, I think it was maybe 2001, and is it currently active also with the Secretary of State. But keep in mind is that when an organization and a company is registered with Secretary of State, there's a difference between a company who is listed as an assumed name, where basically probably the wherewithal of the company is actually tied to the individual who is the owner of the company, whereas when you have a limited liability company, the liability of that company is basically tied to whatever assets that limited liability company may have. And generally speaking, a limited liability company doesn't have much in the way of assets whatsoever, and that they have to basically rely upon whether or not, if they've got the insurance or the bonding, to be able to back them up and back up their work, that there isn't actually too much else. And in this kind of situation, there probably isn't much in the way of real estate holdings. I can't speak for that, but the address, of course, is the same address as seems to be as you know, the home address of the principal operator of the business. And so these were some of the concerns that a citizen brought forward to the council to ask, you know, really, what is it that, you know, how is the bidding being done? And really, what are the qualifications, in that if we are looking at a retaining wall that the city has taken on the obligation to maintain and repair in perpetuity and has a liability for that, do we need to be extra certain that whatever we are doing, that we are actually not broadening our liability, and that we are actually minimizing our liability? Because if the retaining wall is in fact failing, as it has been alleged over the last few years, if it is indeed failing, then we don't want to put ourselves in that position again, since the council majority has indeed obligated us to a perpetual liability obligation for this retaining wall, in that they passed the agreement that was entered into with the property owner, which assumes all the liability for that wall in the event that it should fail or that there's any other problems having to do with maintenance. So these are the kinds of questions that I think that the council really was being challenged with by the citizens questioning and bringing to the table the questions about the low bidder in this instance. So let's continue on with our film footage, and then we'll return after we hear some more.
It's failing for a lot of different reasons. And one of the arguments that was made to us years ago was it's failing because it wasn't very well built. And so, you know, that's why you have a general concern when you have an organization company that's just new, been around, no one's really worked with them, no one has any experience with them, and they're building something that we're going to be on the hook for. I mean, we're building a retaining wall on a developer's private property, which I have a massive problem with, and then we're going to go ahead and give the award to a company that, you know, there's some questions that they're able to do that. They don't have the track record like a couple of other companies in here, and a couple of other ones, in fairness, haven't heard their name as being common either, okay? Which doesn't mean they're bad or good, just never heard of them, not a big deal. You know, the only good thing out of this whole thing is we waited a couple more years and we saved ourselves another $120-some thousand. About the only extent out of the whole thing. So, you know, I just...
Mayor and Council, if, again, I certainly don't want to be argumentative. Let me explain.
Say what you want.
The thought process we have is when we opened the bids, we had similar concerns and say, you know, is this contractor reliable? What has to happen on a project before payment gets made that makes the bond available? The engineer has to certify that wall and that it's built according to the plans. So this contractor gets bonded, and the bonding company says, yes, this contractor can build it, so our engineer, our design engineer, can certify to us as the owner that this is built to the specifications. So the design of the wall remains the responsibility of the engineer who signs off. We hired the engineer to spend time out there, and I checked with SEH and I said, you know, I want to be sure we have a good contract with you to be out there to observe, that you certify back to us as a city that this wall is built to the best of your knowledge according to the plans that you put together. It's why we hire the engineers. It's why we hire the...
So one thing that I just thought of this very moment is that, of course, the council hasn't necessarily seen the specifications for the bids. Now, one thing that seems very clear for me in listening to this in retrospect, which hadn't occurred to me when I was at the council meeting, is that the engineering firm, SEH, is doing the engineering, and Urban Companies, LLC, is doing the building, the construction of that retaining wall. Now, I know for many of these companies that they actually have an engineer on staff themselves to do that engineering work, to engineer the design plan of the wall and do the construction. So the question that I didn't ask at the council meeting, that if I were able to have the chance to ask the question again today, is, do the other bids that were presented, is the difference in the price because they have an on-staff engineer who is actually designing the plans and doing the certification of the work their company performs. Whereas this appears to be, we have hired an engineer, and then this other guy is going to be doing the work that the engineer has designed and is going to certify. Now, whether or not that has a difference in the ultimate outcome or not, I don't know. But you can see where many times when you're at the council meeting, there are many intricacies of what could be going on that if you're not thinking about all the angles, and all that information isn't in the packet, that you don't really know. And because we don't have full information in our council packets to the council from the staff, we actually don't know what those bids contained as to what they were going to provide for that price. And we also don't know what the bid was that was advertised. The council does not get that information unless we specifically ask. And in this case, I'd have to say that I hadn't asked, and it hadn't occurred to me till this moment that there might be two different things going on here with regard to who's providing the engineer, the certification, and the design. Let's continue on and see if there's something else here perhaps that we can discover together.
Okay, Ms. Juniman?
I think you already answered this, but the whole point of any risk factor is the bonding, is it not?
And that is a very substantial risk. I mean, it's literally if you get a bond pulled, you typically don't get another bond. You have to demonstrate that you're there. Having pulled bonds before, I mean, it literally gets back to the contractor's ability to ever function, and likely would not be in business.
Think about it as full faith.
Yes, full faith. Good. And my only comment is, you know, Eric, we can do this about somebody knowing somebody, but if you, A, refuse somebody and try and go anywhere with that, you'll get slapped for saying that you were discriminating against someone because they happen to be, I mean, so the guy is the son of a city administrator. What's that got to do with anything? Somebody's smarter than his dad. He went into a more reliable business than having to be in
He's in
government.
business with his kid, that's the difference.
Well, he's got, okay, he paid with some money to his kid. What's that got to do with anything? I just don't think it's safe that you want to go there, is what I'm trying to say, when this person is bonded. If we didn't have the bond behind it, we might have a conversation. Otherwise, I think it's a dangerous conversation.
Mr. Nephew.
Just to be perfectly clear with the city attorney, does this relationship of the proprietor of this company with an administrator of a neighboring city represent any kind of conflict of interest for the city of Maplewood in awarding this bid to them as the lowest responsible bidder?
Mayor and council, if you were sitting in the Vadnais Heights City Council, I'd say that the problem would be present. But in this case, it was, I mean, I don't know what fractional interest the administrator of Vadnais Heights has to the construction company of his sons, but I don't see a connection there that would raise the question of conflict of interest.
Okay. So the answer there is no. And then on the flip side, is the relationship grounds for refusing a bid? I mean, because it has nothing to do with the, as far as I can tell, with the ability to perform as they specified in their bidding documents, right?
Sure, Mayor and council. As I said before, state law requires you to take the lowest responsible bidder. You know, get the best deal you can with the most reliable entity that bids for it. Oftentimes, that's not always the cheapest bid. You know, it's in the opinion of the people making the recommendation, it's who can get the work done the best for the money. And in this case, I think you're there, and I don't think the connections have anything to do with it, put it that way.
So if I made a motion to approve somebody who wasn't on the bottom of the list and just said, because I don't know the other guys, but I know, let's say, you know, number whatever, even though they're a higher bid, that would get us in problems under the state law to do it simply on that basis without some kind of justification that said there's a reason why.
So, Mr. Nephew, Councilmember Nephew brings up a good point, is that looking at the information that the council has simply before it, we would not be able to say, by looking at the information in our packet, that such and such company, even though they don't have the lowest price for their bid, that we want to select them. The council would not be able to do that because we don't have any other information in our packet to say we are selecting them because they have more experience or that they have done similar kinds of walls in the past or that they have had less percentage of failure rates of retaining walls in their history of doing business, or that they have an on-site engineer who is there to look at the work and certify it at the end of every day. There's not that kind of detail in the information given to the council. So given what it is before us, we only have what the